Welcome back. In last few videos, we talked about oligopoly, and as we had learned that oligopoly is an example of imperfect competition. The other example of imperfect competition is monopolistic competition. We begin with two extremes. One extreme was perfectly competitive market and other was monopoly. In perfectly competitive market, we had so many buyers, so many sellers, both on both sides, that everyone, all participant in the market were price taker. They couldn't control the price. Price was decided by demand side forces and supply side forces. Then we had other extreme, that was monopoly. Of course, there could be many buyers or few buyers, that is not important. On monopoly side, the important was that there is only one seller. So, that firm controlled the supply side. So, it became the price setter or price maker. Now, we are talking about this monopolistic competition which lies in the middle of perfectly competitive market and a monopoly market. What are the features of this monopolistic competition? That there are many sellers, but not as many as the number of sellers in perfectly competitive market. Second difference is that in perfectly competitive market, all firms sell identical product. We call those products homogeneous product. An example that we gave from commodity market, that everyone is producing exactly the same product. Of course, on monopoly side, one need not worry about whether the product is differentiated or homogeneous, because there is only one product by definition, only one seller. So, in that sense, we can say monopolistic competition is closer to the monopoly situation, but in other sense it is way closer to perfectly competitive market, because in monopolistic competition we allow for free entry and exit. Of course, in true sense, this is an extreme that we are talking about. So, one can say rather than free, one can say that entry or exit bar is much lower, that one can enter or exit at will. What would be the example here? Example could be books, whether you use variance microeconomics or you want to use Freud's managerial economics. Very similar content, slightly different treatment. So, in a way, people who like variance style of writing, they would prefer variant. People who like Freud's writing, they would prefer Freud. Cinema hall, cinemas, one can say cinemas. Motor mechanics. So, these are different examples. Or grocery store, they are trying to sell similar product, but in some way they are different, layout is different, perhaps you like the friendliness of the seller and so on. So, these could be the examples. Now, what we saw in perfectly competitive market, and I must repeat that when we are talking about monopolistic competitive firm, we will keep on comparing it with a firm operating in perfectly competitive market, also the firm that is the monopolist. So, what we saw that a firm that operates in perfectly competitive market faces horizontal demand curve. It means the demand is perfectly elastic. What we saw in case, let me write here, perfectly firm in perfectly competitive market. How about monopolist? Monopolist faces a downward sloping demand curve. This is the case with the monopolistic competitive firm also. Of course, one can say that the elasticity is lower in case of monopolistic competitive firm, because there may not be perfect substitute, but there are close substitutes. So, one can move to other good So, it faces, one can say that one needs to compare the elasticity. One can say that perhaps if this is for monopolist, then this is for a monopolistic competitive firm. So, that is the difference. But the key thing is that in this sense, it is way closer to the monopolist, because once you have a downward sloping demand curve, you will have of course a downward sloping marginal revenue curve, and let us say that this firm faces, this is the marginal cost curve. So, of course, at this point you have, this is MR, this is the demand curve, here MR is equal to MC. So, this is the Q star and this is the P star. So, how can we get the P star? P star can be obtained from here. So, this is just P. And so, if you look at qualitatively, so this is very similar to what happens to the monopolist firm. Of course, as in such cases, the markup, we can say this is the markup. Markup depends on price elasticity of demand. As monopolist competitive firm faces less elastic demand, less than the monopolist firm, so of course here markup is going to be lower. But one more thing we need to pay attention, that how much is going to be the profit, and for that we have to bring the average total cost curve. And how would it look like? The average total cost curve could look like, I'm just saying, for example, this is the way average total cost curve. So, what does it mean? We can say that the profit to this firm is going to be, because this is the average total cost. So, at the profit is going to be total revenue minus total cost, P star multiplied by Q star minus ATC, average total cost at Q star multiplied by Q star. So, Q star can be taken as common, and this is P star minus ATC Q star, and this is this length, and this length is Q star. So, we can say this is the profit that is obtained by a monopolistic competitive firm. But this could very much have been the loss. So, let us look at it. Let us look at the scenario in which there is a loss, and we could have this is of course demand curve, marginal revenue curve, marginal cost curve, and this is Q star, and this is P star, and it so happens that average total cost is like this. So, clearly in this case average total cost at Q star exceed the P star, and therefore, this is going to be the loss incurred by the firm. Okay. Now, the key thing is that of course, if there is a profit, more firm can join, the more firm can enter the market, and if there is a loss, some firm may exit the market, because unlike the monopolist, where there is a barrier to entry to exit, here there is no barrier to entry or exit. Firms can join the market, firms can leave. And of course, as we are talking about monopolistic competition, a new firm is coming, it would not be selling exactly the same product. It would have a differentiated product. So, as more firms are selling the differentiated product, what would happen to the demand curve that this particular firm is facing? Let us say if it was earlier like this, it will become more elastic. So, perhaps it will decrease like this, or one can say one could have little flatter, okay, because flatness increases the elasticity. So, that would be the change. So, ultimately what is going to happen, let us say this is P and this is Q, because demand would keep on changing, because each firm is facing a particular downward sloping curve that depends on how many other differentiated products are in the market. So, this is demand, this is marginal revenue, this is marginal cost, and so this is the way it is going to happen. This is ATC and this is the Q star, this is the P star, and this is also equal to ATC star at Q star. So, in the long run profit will become equal to 0. So, no new firm will enter or exit in the market, and this feature makes it very different from the monopoly market situation, because here what is happening, that P star is equal to ATC Q star. So, let us compare this monopolistic firm in long run with perfect, a firm that is operating in perfectly competitive market, and both for long run. So, let me do the two graphs here. One is for perfectly competitive firm and another for the monopolistic firm. Monopolistic competitive firm and perfectly competitive firm. So, here it is very simple that you know that P is equal to MC, and we can say this is the, and then we have ATC curve that we can draw. The ATC curve is going to be like this, ATC, and the marginal cost curve is going to be like this. This is the marginal cost curve, and this is the point where the P is equal to MC. So, we can say this is quantity produced, and this is also efficient scale for the society. You know, this is where the cost is lowest, efficient scale. Let us do the previous graph once again. Here we can have, let us say this is MC curve, and then we have, let us say, ATC curve, and so we should have here this is the demand curve, this is marginal revenue curve, and things like that. Of course, this is not the perfect graph, but we have to be, so this is where this Q star is produced, this is where P is, and there is P star, and at this point ATC is equal. What do we see here? We see a markup that we have seen in the earlier case also, and let us see, this is Q star, quantity produced, and here is the efficient scale. What is efficient scale? The quantity level at which the cost on per unit terms gets minimized. So, this is the efficient scale. So, we see that a firm that is operating as a monopolistic competitive environment and a firm that is operating in perfectly competitive environment, we see that monopolistic competitive firm is less efficient for two reasons: that there is excess capacity. And how much is the excess capacity? We can point out here that this is the excess capacity, because this would have been the much better, but where we are producing at lower level. So, one can say that there is excess capacity. And second, there is a markup price, this much, because P star is not equal to MC. In fact, P star is greater than MC. Here you see that P star is equal to MC and there is no excess capacity. So, when you compare these two, it is very clear that monopolistic competitive environment gives less efficient result from the societal perspective. Very clearly, in monopolistic competition setting, social welfare is not maximized. Two reasons, both we just saw that we are not producing at efficient scale and there is a markup. But the problem is even bigger, because the policy makers cannot fix this welfare related problem in monopolistic competition. They can do something in case of monopoly. They can regulate monopoly better, because monopolist is making some profit, so they can ask them to produce at higher level. The problem here with monopolistic competition is that in long run profit is zero. So, it is difficult to figure out how policy intervention can help improve the welfare. But before I close this topic and move to a topic related to it, that is advertisement, I must say that this is perhaps the most common form of market that we see. You know, the nearest doctor, lawyers, grocery store, movies, theater, movies, book, all these examples are from monopolistic competition. So, we must understand monopolistic competition in a very good fashion. Okay. So, that is it for monopolistic competition. In next video, we are going to talk about advertisement. Thank you.